WWDC 2025. Most of you have probably already seen the talk around the new liquid glass design language, but I want to talk about two framework announcements. First, Apple's on-device foundational model framework and upgraded models, but second, and perhaps the coolest one that got almost no mention at all, is a containerization framework for Mac that might make Docker start to worry. More about that in a bit. First, let's start with the foundational models framework. This will let developers use Apple's on-device offline AI models. For example, if you had a journaling app, you could use this to add extra features without the worry of API costs or privacy concerns. The framework has native support for Swift, and the code looks pretty straightforward. Here's how you can generate some text, and you can take it a step further and create some tools like a classic get weather one, and you just pass this into the language model session. There's even support for structured outputs to create Swift data structures, but be careful here because Apple, as usual, have rebranded something and they call structured outputs guided generation. The big question though is the on-device model actually usable? As so far my experience with Apple Intelligence has been anything but intelligent. The models they use have actually been updated with improved tool use and reasoning capabilities. The on-device model is an approximately 3 billion parameter model, and the server model for when you need a little bit more power is actually a mixture of expert server-based model. They actually published a blog post about these upgrades, and surprisingly, there's some benchmarks. Using human graders to evaluate responses, the on-device model beats the slightly larger Quen 2.53b model, but it loses to Quen 3.4b and Gemma 3.4b. It does apparently perform much better at English outside of the US, basically British, Canadian, and a few others, so I guess that's a win for me. But bad news if you're Portuguese, French, Italian, German, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. It performs significantly worse than Gemma there. In terms of image responses though, again with a human eval test, it does seem to perform pretty well, matching Gemma. As for the server model though, across the board it's better than Llama 4 Scout, whose total size and active number of parameters are comparable to this server model, but it will lose out to the larger models such as Quen 3 235b and GPT-4o on most other benchmarks, particularly in image generation. Wow, is GPT-4o really good at that. Apple has a bit of catching up to do then, but this seems like a great step for app developers. Something else really cool for macOS users though is the Containerization Framework, which only gets a couple lines of text in a blog post. The Containerization Framework enables developers to create, download, or run Linux container images directly on Mac. It's built on an open source framework, optimized for Apple Silicon, and provides secure isolation between container images. This sounds absolutely awesome. Linux VM and Docker have always seemingly run a little bit unoptimized. The projects are already on GitHub to try out. There's containerization, which seems like the core architecture, and then there's the container project, which is seemingly that version of Docker that utilizes that containerization project. There's a technical overview in here as well if you want to learn a little bit more, but the TLDR is this. Containers runs containers differently. Using the containerization package, it runs a lightweight VM for each container that you create, as opposed to one Linux VM running all of your containers, which is the more traditional approach. This comes with security, privacy, and performance benefits. Containers also consume and produce standard OCI images, so you can easily build with and run images produced by other container applications, and the images that you build will run everywhere. So goodbye Docker for Mac users, I guess, although this does seem more in line with projects like Orbstack and Kalima. There we go, that is all of the WWDC news that I thought was interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, subscribe, and as always, see you in the next one.